Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of The Alters. I play on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Series S, PS5, and PC. So let's get into the story. You play as Jan Dolsky, the member of a space exploration team, essentially. They're going to a very specific planet because there's a theoretical element there called rapidium. Or at least it's theoretically there, because apparently it's like magical shit that changes its molecular structure and is really hard to pin down and so on and so forth. But as you can guess, it's not that simple, and shit goes sideways when you land and you find the rest of your crew all died in their capsules. This leaves Jan to try and find rapidium, to try and operate the base, to try and get to a point where he can be rescued, because the company he works for really doesn't want to rescue him without the rapidium. But he also can't operate the base as one freaking man. And basically, once you find some rapidium, they go, hey, let's do this really creepy, weird thing called branching, where the quantum computer reads all of your memories and then basically creates a whole new person based on if they had made a different decision than you had at a certain point in time, which leads to the creation of things like maintenance Jan, scientist Jan, botanist Jan. That's, what it goes through. There's security guards, there's doctors, there's all sorts of stuff like that. And while I do think that is a cool idea and I think it was overall well executed, there are some things that feel a little stereotypical, specifically with each of their characters. The scientist acts like, you would expect him to act, kind of a dickhead, overly smart guy. The maintenance guy is the gruff and tougher kind of guy. So that felt a little stereotypical, but I do get it, and I think it was also kind of important to help, create some distinction, and it adds to the gameplay. And overall, I thought it was kind of an interesting idea, especially some of the interactions between you and the company guys, as well as you and these other Jans, because they are different than you. Apart from having a similar childhood, their life up to this age was completely different, even if it didn't really exist. Which that obviously goes into a whole bunch of deeper ideas of what is existence and so on and so forth. But we're gonna move on to the audio, and the first thing I'm gonna say is I enjoyed the music in this game. I think it worked very well. It's not necessarily something that I want to own, but I think it's really, really good. And I think it more than fits. Then you have the sound effects, which I think are fantastic. I think the different sound effects throughout the game, whether it's you out mining or exploring and weird sci-fi shit happening, or just the sounds around the base based on the different rooms that you're in, I think that all works incredibly well. And then you have the voiceover work, which you have Prime Jan Dolsky, and then you have Scientist Jan, who has a slightly different mannerism and speech pattern. Maintenance Jan does sound gruffer. Botanist Jan sounds a lot softer, etc., etc. So I do think that was cool, and they do help add the distinction between these individuals, so I think that was important for characterization. And then we have gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a third-person base-building survival game. It really is base building because you need to build new rooms, you need to expand on your base when you are able to, you need to manage storage, you need to create a dormitory for your other Jans, you need to, make sure you're performing maintenance on the base, cooking, farming, all sorts of crap in the base, all of that base management type of stuff. But then it's also third-person exploration where you run around the world, you set up mining platforms, you scan for minerals, you collect minerals just running around, you find all sorts of other weird stuff. You can find luggage that got accidentally deposited there that has some stuff that is good for helping to manage the other Jans, which is one of the other things that I didn't personally enjoy too much in this game. Because all the Jans have these different personalities, they can, not get along with each other, not get along with you. And for me personally, I felt like that part could get a little tedious in the game. I know they have to accelerate some of these things purely for the purpose of gameplay, because also whenever you're doing actions, it accelerates time. So I guess it kind of makes sense that people would start to wear on each other and so on. But it does get a little frustrating at times. It doesn't always make sense. Some of that shit is really childish when you're in a life or death, let's get the fuck out of here situation. But I also found it a little frustrating dealing with all the micromanaging of, keeping up with maintenance, keeping up with the mining, keeping up with all of that so that you can get what you need and get where you're going. I admittedly did restart. I'd played a decent amount, but I was fucked. So I restarted and I started doing way better. I personally found that to help a lot. But I will say some of the smaller micromanaging things do still wear on me. That first run where I abandoned it, it was much more frustrating and far less enjoyable dealing with a lot of that stuff. But I can definitely see how somebody might really enjoy a game like this. I did enjoy certain elements. I was really much more invested in the story. And that's one thing I did enjoy, is games like this don't always necessarily have a story driving you or good objectives driving you. And The Alters does have those objectives. It does have a story, and that does drive me forward in the game. But let's move on to the controls. And the first thing I'm going to say about the controls is I think they work well. I will say overall movement is a bit clunky. But as for camera controls, as for a lot of the other things like placing items and objects and all that crap, I think it worked well. Last but not least, the graphics and visuals. I think it's a very good looking game. And I think what they did, I mean, again, you get into a very stereotypical level with the characters. The botanist is what you imagine would be a botanist, the scientists, so on, and the maintenance, so on. But they do actually have a really good explanation for it that I liked. You find out that it's really Jan Dolsky's image of what they would be like. The scientist points out that he doesn't need glasses, but because Jan, you know, correlates glasses with being smart, the scientist had glasses. But I do think that was also beneficial so that you could help manage the different Jans and you didn't get them all mixed up, which could be a pain in the ass if they all looked exactly like Prime Jan. But going beyond that, I really loved the base, the design of the base. I loved the world too. Just in general, all of the different environments, because the base, each of the rooms does feel different and you get to like manage and map out your base. And like I said, I did a first run and my base map out was shit. It was much better the second time around. It flowed way better. But I also like the different rooms. I like the garden room. I think it looks like a good garden room. It looks like it would make sense in the base versus like the kitchen, which again, looks like it would make sense in the base in that situation. Same with the dormitory, the captain's rooms, all of those. I think they did a really cool job making those feel like they fit, and they all have a certain amount of homogeneity, which makes them feel like they belong in the same base and were designed by the same people, and so on and so forth. So I think that does help sell the idea that thought was put into all of this within the game world. But then you have the world that you're actually exploring. I think that was actually really cool. It did feel different and alien to what Earth feels like. Whereas most games, they're like, nah, this is gonna feel exactly like Earth because, you know, Earth, I guess. But like, this did feel different. It did feel unique. I liked the different areas. I like the different weather. I like how there's like radiation storms. Oh God, the magnetic storms. Those pissed me the fuck off. But I think what they did with a lot of those things and making it easy to determine what an area would be good for mining for, making it easy to find, you know, the things that you need to mine, the ones that you're picking up, as well as the areas where you need to plant the mining platforms. I thought all of that was very well done and clearly well thought out. I do think some of the animations are a little shit, but I think that's probably one of my biggest complaints. Now, as for glitches, I did have a couple of weird ones here or there where my character was stuck and just wouldn't move. I was able to like do the pause screen and manipulate in there or like wiggle around and hit other buttons and eventually free myself. But it was weird. It felt shitty and I don't know why it would happen, and it would happen at random. One time I was in the elevator and another time I was just kind of standing in one of the rooms. Either way, frustrating, annoying, nothing game destroying. Now to get into the wrap up, as I pointed out, my first playthrough really frustrated me and I didn't enjoy it. I did start to enjoy the second playthrough more, but this still isn't necessarily my favorite type of game. I can absolutely see how somebody would enjoy this game. It's just not necessarily a game that I want to spend huge amounts of time in. Like honestly, after having played it for a while, I don't know if I wasn't reviewing it that I would come back to it. Like when I abandoned the first playthrough, I don't know that I would have started a second had I not been reviewing this game. But I'm 100% sure that's much more a me thing. I know there's an audience out there for this game, and I think they'll absolutely enjoy it. And in reality, I did enjoy my second run much more, but at the same time, it's not something that I'm like, oh, I needed this in my life. This doesn't necessarily speak to me. It definitely will speak to other people out there though. So if anything that I described in the gameplay mechanics and whatnot section appeals to you, I would fully recommend this game to you. But if anything I described in there sounds like something you're like, or just doesn't sound appealing at all, then yeah, I kind of fall in that same camp. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, have you ever played a game that made you feel like that, where you're like, I know there are people who will love this, it's just not me. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one. Well, I just spent the last 8 minutes not fucking recording. Ugh.